There's a new energy in Harry's camp that they want to resolve things, they want things to run smoothly now.
I would actually call it a cry for help from Harry's side. I mean, obviously his so-called empire is crashing down.
I think the moment when Harry was kind of shocked back into reality was when Charles got cancer, but he kind of got the cold shoulder.
He did obviously say in that BBC interview, I don't know how much longer my father has left, and obviously dropped a bunch more bombshells in that interview. It wasn't that long ago, so it's kind of crazy now that they're trying to share diary slots and trying to figure out how he can kind of get back in with the royal fold.
The problem is not the operation to protect herself, the problem is the operation to try to destroy everybody else, which didn't come out for several years. But you know, there's always been this thing that Meghan's kind of intimated that she's got receipts.
I did some calculations. She basically has to sell 2.7 million pots of jam a year just to make $15 million, which I think they're running a billionaire lifestyle on a millionaire budget. So I don't even think that's going to cover a lot of their base level costs.
Hello and welcome to The Sun's Royal exclusive show. I'm Bronte Coy, news.com.au's royal reporter, and I'm filling in for your usual host, The Sun's royal editor, Matt Wilkinson, who's on a well-deserved break. I'm delighted to have with me here in studio Newsweek's chief royal correspondent, Jack Royston, and news commentator Samara Gill. We'll kick off with what appears to be a development after reports of this royal peace meeting that happened recently between Prince Harry and the King's senior aides. We're hearing now that Harry's offered to actually share his official diary engagements with the palace in a bid to reduce those clashes we've seen so many times over the years. All right, it's a complex saga. How useful is this offer from Harry? Will it have an impact on the palace?
It does have the potential to be quite useful. So basically, this is what that meeting was all about. It was obviously a meeting between the staff and not the principals, not the royal family members themselves, and it was about the staff and not the principals working together. So the idea is, you know, if they're both on the same page, those two sides are on the same page, then they're going to generate less stuff for us to talk about because, you know, we won't be there writing loads of stories about how Prince Harry and Meghan overshadowed Charles or overshadowed Camilla or even overshadowed William. And, you know, that's part of this, is that anything that Harry shares with Buckingham Palace has the potential to then be passed on by BP to KP, to Kensington Palace, which obviously is Prince William's private office. So he will get an insight into Harry's work schedule too. But what it really comes down to, I think, is actually it's what we've already been discussing, which is it's just there's a new energy in Harry's camp that they want to resolve things, they want things to run smoothly now, and the hope is that that becomes a stepping stone on the way to greater peace between the royals themselves, between Harry and Charles, and that will be the test. Do Harry and Charles sit down face to face and meet each other off the back of this?
And one name that hasn't been mentioned a lot, even just now, is Prince William. What do we know about the current state of his relationship with Harry?
Well, so they've said that they are going to extend that sharing of the dates and diaries to Kensington Palace, obviously where William operates out of. But I would barely call it a peace offering. I would actually call it a cry for help from Harry's side. I mean, obviously his so-called empire is crashing down. Netflix is obviously will be wrapping up their contract that was worth $100 million for them. A lot of their supposed shows that they produced did extremely badly in Netflix's ratings. So they have shown that they basically can't exist outside the structure of the palace. And in my opinion, this looks like Harry crawling back and saying, please, please let me in, because I don't know what I'm going to do without you guys. And I think he should start with an apology first. We need an apology. We don't need sharing of dates. We need a proper reconciliation process if this is what he wants to do.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. What do you think it will take for there to be a mutual agreement? Do you think it's possible, or do you think it's all too far gone?
I think the really key thing here is that people don't start kind of blabbing publicly about what gets discussed. And so far, you know, the fact that this story got published at all, you know, the original story about this meeting, those photographs, which were kind of embarrassing for both sides, got published, like threatened to blow this whole thing up, even when it was at this embryonic stage. And right now, both sides are being fairly mature about it, and there is still a willingness to work together on both sides. So that's positive. But they need to try to move past simply sharing diaries Harry, clearly wants to sit down with Charles. I have a slightly different take on it to Samara, which is that actually, I think the moment when Harry was kind of shocked back into reality was when Charles got cancer. But he kind of got the cold shoulder. People might remember he just ran over to Britain straight away, dropped everything. Actually, Charles had known for a couple of weeks, but Harry seemed to find out right around about the same time we did. He dropped everything, flew to Britain, and then he only got about 30, 45 minutes with his father before Charles flew to Sandringham. He then came to Britain again in the May, that was the February. He came to Britain again in May, didn't see his father, but his spokesperson released a statement at the time saying he hoped to see him soon, and that still hasn't happened yet. So from Harry's point of view, I think that really is what shocked him back to reality, to realise that he did have to do more to help this relationship. And, I think Meghan, I'm not completely writing off Meghan's relationship with Netflix at this time. Clearly she is not going to become an interstellar TV producer, and nor is Harry. We've seen so much of the content that they've produced. It's the recent stuff has been very bland and very vanilla, and it's, nothing really is going to suddenly change there. And they're not going to turn into the next Shonda Rhimes, or, it's not going to happen. But Netflix has an equity share, they have an equity stake in Meghan's company as ever, which actually does have the potential to earn them huge amounts of money. One key thing, though, Harry has very little going on at the moment.
Well,
and
I was going to ask, because I want to talk to you about the Netflix deal, but before we move on from this, there was something that I found interesting is there was a period, as you've just mentioned last year, when Harry came over here and we were hearing a lot about sort of what was going on with their relationship. He was by his father's side and he said that he wasn't able to catch up with him in May. There's been, after the BBC interview, a period of relative quiet in terms of where the relationship was at. Why do you think now, very much now, we're hearing so much about it?
I think it's...
Where's it coming from is, I guess, what I'm asking.
So that BBC interview was a huge moment, and Harry clearly experienced restraint collapse, basically. He'd clearly gone in. I'm sure that they had that interview booked in the diary before they knew the outcome of the case. And Harry probably imagined that he was going to go in there and give this plea for reconciliation with his family. Then he saw he'd lost the case and just was furious about it. And so he started, giving these swipes at Charles in the middle of this interview that was supposed to be calling for reconciliation. And so I thought that had a huge potential to blow any chance that he had. But it is promising to see these new meetings taking place. I think the reason behind it, though, is fundamentally because Harry had a clear out, and Meghan had a clear out of their PR team on both sides of the Atlantic. They brought new people in who have come with new energy and a real determination to move the dial in terms of public opinion, move the dial in terms of media coverage of the Sussexes, and that comes with it, move the dial in terms of the relationship with the palace.
And so we know what's happened so far. We know that the meetings happened. We've had this report about the diary being shared. What do you expect may happen with this situation now down the line in terms of Harry coming here, him having face-to-face possibly with the King?
I think he's trying to get reconciliation before the King goes. I mean, he did obviously say in that BBC interview, I don't know how much longer my father has left, and obviously dropped a bunch more bombshells in that interview, which wasn't that long ago. So it's kind of crazy now that they're trying to share diary slots and trying to figure out how he can kind of get back in with the royal fold, because Queen Elizabeth II did say, you can't have it both ways. You can't be 1 foot in, 1 foot out royals. I don't want that. And I think that this is really betraying what she wanted for them. They need to choose. I just don't agree with this hybrid situation. They're like typical millennial royals who want to do gig economy jobs in the royal family or something. I don't exactly know what their whole plan is. It's a very confused strategy. And I do agree that they've got a better team who's clearly trying to fashion something out of this. But I just think it's a very confused, dilapidated thing, and I don't see it going anywhere.
You don't think we'll see them in the room together? You don't think we'll see Harry and the King actually sit down in the coming months?
I think there's a chance we will, but I do think Charles is going to need to be slightly dragged into it. I think Charles got to a point after his diagnosis where I think he took a decision that he needed to protect his peace, and that his younger son was causing him a significant amount of stress and anxiety in his life. And so he took a decision that he needed to focus on his health and getting back to the place that he needed to be, and that meant not exhaustingly spending all of his time kind of running around after Harry. And so Harry is going to have to show Charles that having a relationship is not going to be exhausting and draining for him. if Harry's serious about wanting to repair that relationship. And so it's going to have to be softly, and Harry's probably going to have to soak some stuff up along the way. Charles has soaked up a huge amount of pain, and without turned the other cheek, not fought back, except in small ways like taking Frogmore Cottage away. And it's Harry's turn. Harry's going to have to soak up a lot as well.
It's funny, just anecdotally, that's reminded me of one of the saddest lines in Spare that really stayed with me. It's right at the beginning. It's just really reminded me.
I already know what you're going to say, but say it.
I always think about it because it was before the king was diagnosed with cancer, as far as we know, because this goes back a couple of years. And Harry writes himself that Charles looked at him and William and said, "Please, boys, don't make my final years a misery." Now, I thought of that when you just said that, because it is. I mean, we've seen, assuming that Harry's account of that is true, which I mean, no reason to doubt that line. That does say a lot about his character and how he's viewing these final years, and then you add cancer to that, and that changes. Sorry, that just reminded me.
No, it's the fact that you even know that, because Spare was a publication full of dirty laundry of the royal family, something I don't think the king should just forget easily, and I certainly don't think William is going to forget easily. So the publication of Spare, what you know that he said, the nitty-gritty details of Harry's upbringing, that's stuff that you can't just sort of say, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but I'd like to be friends now. Sorry about that." I think that it's horrible, and I really, really think it's going to take a lot more from Harry's side, and concessions coming from him. Like you said, the king made obviously a lot, but I didn't see a lot from Harry's side. So I just don't think he's actually mature enough to start accepting what his future might look like.
I actually think Charles has soaked up a lot at points from both his sons, a lot less from William, like certainly virtually nothing publicly, but I kind of, I feel quite sorry for Charles quite a lot of the time. I think he must have been in a really lonely position in a lot of periods of his life. They say it's lonely at the top. And he obviously, he had his reputation disintegrate during the Diana era, and I have huge sympathy for Diana. It's not that I'm taking Charles's side against her. I don't massive sympathy for Diana, but then he comes out of that, and he has his sons trying to persuade him not to marry Camilla. Like I went through recently trying to look for quotes in which William was really praising Charles, and they are so much harder to find than you would expect. Like he has said positive stuff, but during, Charles had this big, so in 2017 they had the 20th anniversary of Diana's death. William and Harry did loads about it. It was obviously very difficult for Charles. The following year, it was Charles's 70th birthday, and so there was a big drive from Clarence House at the time to try to kind of rehabilitate Charles, to use that as a vehicle to generate some positive publicity. And, in both the Diana period, the 2017 Diana period and the Charles 70th birthday period, there was precious little being said by his sons to help with that process. And actually, I think at that point, Harry probably did more than William did. Obviously, recent years have slightly undone some of that work.
Some of the credit, yeah.
But I just think, how lonely must that feel to be somebody who most of the people around you are your staff. You have this relationship with your sons that's defined by the kind of working environment that you live your entire life in and all the rivalries that come with it. Then, your younger son goes off to America and, tries to blow you up from afar. Like, it must be really lonely with words.
Yeah, even the Angola trip, just a week ago, or a couple of weeks ago, that clashed with Camilla's birthday, which was cited as why they're now doing this sort of rapprochement or trying to do it. That's obviously, I don't think that was a clash that just happened. I think Harry knew exactly what he was doing, replicating his mother's pictures on Camilla's birthday, and knowing, as we can see from quotes in Spare, Camilla changed his old bedroom into her dressing room, and all these feuds that run really deep. So I agree with you. I think there is conflict with both the sons, but yeah, Harry's definitely.
Yeah, I think it's a very complex family dynamic across the board. Obviously, certain aspects get a lot of attention, but you're right, there is a lot more to it. There's a lot of players involved. And speaking of other players being involved, we can't really mention Harry without Meghan. So there's an interesting claim about her time in the royal family, which has resurfaced from Valentine Lowe's royal biography, Courtiers. Now, we've had him on the show here. He's a wonderful source. And he alleged in it that Meghan had left a, quote, trail of evidence behind so that when the time came for Harry and Meghan to leave, she'd be able to say, look how they failed to support me. I want to ask, what do you make of this claim?
I'm sure she did. I think in some ways it's a rational thing to do. And, I think a lot of people would have done exactly that. I think the problem is not necessarily with Meghan doing that. The problem is actually with the way that Harry and Meghan kind of piled in quite relentlessly on the royals. And particularly, I do think that even the Oprah interview, they did botch it. Like certain aspects of it were botched. And, could have been done differently and better in a way that would be less toxic and destructive. For example, the racism allegation, they've clearly kind of tried to change it retrospectively or row it back. So obviously they botched, Meghan botched how she described that story. So I'm not, it's so insanely intense being a royal, for all of them, including William, including Kate. I actually don't think that it's a problem to be trying to collect these little bits and pieces as a safeguard to protect yourself. The problem is not the operation to protect herself. The problem is the operation to try to destroy everybody else, which didn't come out for several years. But there's always been this thing that Meghan's kind of intimated that she's got receipts. That was, in the days after Oprah, one of her friends went on ITV and said, we've got the receipts to prove everything. There was also a point where she was giving an interview and she said, I've never signed anything, so I can say whatever I want. So she's always had this tendency to give these kind of slightly veiled threats that she's sitting on this bombshell. There's one point I think they suggested they'd found their diaries that they kept during these periods. So they've always had been floating these ideas that they're sitting on a kind of a massive nuclear warhead that they can drop at any point. But ultimately, actually, they destroyed themselves by the way that they just basically relentlessly attacked Harry's own family in a context when no one was fighting back. And so they may well still be sitting on unused material that Harry says he'll never share. But it kind of doesn't matter anymore, because even if they did, they're so uniformly viewed as the villains, particularly in Britain. But even in America, they're not viewed in this protective way anymore. So even if they are sitting on some unexploded bombs, I don't actually think that the royals need to be too scared of it.
Well, this story hasn't been confirmed. That allegation hasn't been confirmed by either side, of course, I should say. If it were true that she had, let's take away the cynical aspect just for argument's sake then and say that she was safeguarding it. If it were true, has it been an effective strategy for her to collect that information? Did the quote that Valentine Lowe used was hijack the narrative as it turned against her? Do you think that was effective?
She turned the narrative against herself. I mean, that's how I see it. I mean, I think she probably thought she was safeguarding herself. She probably thought she was collecting all these pebbles of information that she could then fling at the royal family once she exited. But I think actually the bombshell is the bullying allegations and the investigation that is still withheld by the royal family that went into Meghan when she lived at Kensington Palace, and what she has done to the staff. I mean, there were reports that she reduced people to tears. And I just think that stuff that the palace is actually protecting Meghan from. And I think it's really the other way around. I think the palace was a victim of her, not she a victim of the palace. And I think they've used every single bit of information that they can and monetized it and sold it to Netflix and wrote a book and did a podcast. And I don't think there's anything else left. I really don't think there is.
I've said that so many times along the way, though. And I have been wrong. I have been wrong. Very wrong.
Please. I mean, I can't take it.
You do make a really interesting point, which is that actually with the bullying allegations, in a way, the palace did exactly the same thing, because Jason did what any civil servant worth their salt knows to do, which is to, if you have concerns, put them down on record. And that's what he did. But the allegations that Meghan was bullying her staff had been around for a while by the time that he wrote that now famous email to Simon Case, William's private secretary, saying that Meghan had bullied 2 PAs out of the royal household. And he basically put down on his concerns on record and then resigned because he couldn't cope with it anymore. And it's very clear what he's doing, because 1,000 civil servants have done the same thing in different contexts. But it is rational and it is logical. But like you say, the way actually that it destroyed Meghan and Harry's reputations is actually not the fact that the allegation was made, but the fact that they didn't mention it to Oprah. So they went out and they gave this whole interview to Oprah, and they said, Harry said, my family really welcomed Meghan, and then everything changed after they saw how brilliant she was at the job. And that just isn't true, because we know that this massive argument was happening about whether Meghan was bullying the staff, and that was real. And so the fact that they didn't say it to Oprah ultimately was what was so undermining.
Particularly because Harry did talk about it in his book.
He did, he says if there was a sorry, you go.
No. I totally agree. I was just saying the evidence speaks for itself, because obviously post-firm, a lot of staff have exited. They haven't been able to keep a household of staff at all. I mean, it's been a constant revolving door. So, and Vanity Fair's done some investigations. There's been things flung around. Oh, Meghan's a dictator in high heels to work for.
The Hollywood Reporter.
The Hollywood Reporter. Yeah, that was that one.
And there was something you said just earlier, because we touched on Netflix as well. So, of course, there has been a lot made of these conversations that their 5-year Netflix deal may be expiring this year and won't be renewed. I think that's been largely expected, for a while now. But there's been no confirmation from either side, and we don't know what's going to happen there. But that's looking like where it sits. But you've mentioned that you think that they've used up all their content. I was going to ask, do you think if this does expire, will they turn up at a different streaming service? And if they did, what would have to be on offer? What do we think is next for them in terms of their TV production future?
So on a TV side of it, I mean, they have this stellar contact, which is Brian Robbins, the CEO of Paramount Global, who is a neighbour of theirs in Montecito. But unfortunately for them, he is actually leaving Paramount. So he might still be able to make a recommendation. He still might be able to introduce them to somebody, make a recommendation, say how great they are to somebody. But he is actually on his way out as part of a merger deal. There's nothing particularly sinister or suspicious about it. They're merging. He's off. So that's a bit of a blow for them. But I do struggle with the idea that it's going to be a hard break between the Sussexes and Netflix, because Netflix own a stake in As Ever. And I actually think As Ever does have the potential. If Meghan can fix the very real problems that do exist with the company, then I think it could become a bit of a money spinner. Especially the wine. I think she needs to ditch the flour sprinkles, which are kind of ridiculous and always were. But,
They were disgusting. They tasted like sawdust, but anyway.
But also just completely unnecessary, and they cost $15 for 5 grams. But George Clooney, and his co-founders of Casamigos Tequila, they sold the business for $1 billion to Diageo in 2019. It's mega amounts of money. And people might not like it. People who hate Meghan because they think that she betrayed the royal family and that she's a horrible person will want the business to fail for moral reasons. But that's not what happens in a capitalist economy. People do buy stupid stuff, they do, especially people who have a lot of money. And whether Meghan's wine is delicious or whether it's not, people will buy it because it's a talking point. And so if she can get really solid supply chains in place where she can make mega amounts of this stuff. Kylie Minogue sold 21 million bottles of wine. She could sell significant volumes and it could be a massive money spinner. She could make loads of money out of it and Netflix will want to cut with that.
Samara
I think
disagrees.
it's wishful. I'm bursting because I think it's wishful thinking. I mean, I did get my hands on a pot of her jam.
You've tried a lot of her stuff.
Yeah, I've tried a lot of her stuff.
That's some deep dive.
It was actually awful. It was disgusting, but that's a whole other story for another time. I think I did some calculations. She basically has to sell 2.7 million pots of jam a year just to make $15 million, which I think they're running a billionaire lifestyle on a millionaire budget. So I don't even think that's going to cover a lot of their base level costs. I mean, they've got a big mortgage, they've got lots of expenses with security, as Harry loves to tell us, and all those other things. So, and I agree with you. I mean, Jack, her supply chain is crap. I mean, when you want to buy a pot of jam, you're going to go down to the Sainsbury's or the Tesco, wherever, and you want to go buy the refill. I don't know about going online, getting another pot of jam, then then using it. I just don't get it. And I also think with the rosé wine, it's too expensive for the average consumer. I mean, Dolly Parton has a wine that's £7. Even Kylie.
Love Dolly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the difference. And I think a lot of these more direct-to-consumer products, like Kylie Minogue has done, they're in supermarkets. Yeah, they're at an accessible level, and I think that's what Meghan misses out on.
Well, do you know what? I do agree with a lot of that. I think she needs to fix that side of it. But at the time of the second product release, they had 500,000 page views on the As Ever website. And that is a mega amount. And a lot of those people are probably curious. They might be people like you who don't particularly like it.
Haters.
Just looking forward to be able to trash it. But also, a lot of people will get a bottle of Meghan's wine in to serve at a dinner party, because then it's a talking point with all their guests, and they, even if everyone hates it, it still serves its purpose. And I do think that it is going to make people furious, but I could actually see it being a commercial success.
Well, we're going to move on now, because there have been some unbelievably sweet photos this week of Prince William with Princess Charlotte cheering on the Lionesses to their big victory at the Euros, which was so fun to see. It was so great to see her going along with him. And something I've noticed is, this comes just a few weeks after she was at Wimbledon with her brother Prince George and her parents. Are we seeing sort of the next chapter in this soft launch of the kids into royal life? Of course they're young, but are we seeing a little bit more of them stepping into that public spotlight?
Totally. I mean, Charlotte is blockbuster. There's no other way of putting it. When you see any image of her online, you're like, wow, she just really, so much of her character reflects, in my opinion, a bit of Anne, a bit of the Queen. And as you were saying to me earlier in the dressing room, you can see her sort of putting her brothers in line, and she's very quickly becoming one of those absolute superstars of the royal family. And I really do like the tasteful way that they are launching the children, not thrusting them into the spotlight, not making them speak at different things when they're too young, or doing something quite tawdry. I think they're doing it in the right way.
Because you've just touched on it there. We know how protective William and Catherine are of their children's privacy, which is wonderful to see in the positions that they're in. How different do we think that George and Charlotte's lives will be at this point in their teenage years as they head towards adulthood? How different will that be from what we saw from the previous generation of heir and spare?
It's got a potential to really blow up actually a lot sooner than people think, because William was 15 when he did that famous tour of Canada, when Will's mania began and everyone started going crazy over him. But now social media exists, and that back then, even if the media were a little more unrestrained than they are now, and it was hard to appeal to their kind of ethics or morality, there were deals that William could do. He did deals with the media to give him and Kate space when they went to when they were dating at St Andrews University. Now you can do deals with the media, but there's no doing deals with people on social media. And the kids at their schools will all have mobile phones once they're teenagers, so it could get really out of hand really fast. I already see, comments on TikTok videos that are a little, I won't go into it, but you kind of think, wow, you need to
They sort of apply personalities to the kids at a very young age, especially with Louis. I've seen some stuff where he's like a little kid and people, adopting these whole personalities from him.
There's accounts. Diagnosing him as well.
Yeah, there's accounts under their names even, where obviously, there's sort of parody accounts. But I take to your point.
Even that is more positive, but there is a very small contingent of people who don't treat them as though they're children, and it does get almost kind of sinister, and it's going to get worse as time goes on. But right now, George and Charlotte probably won't be that aware of it. Louis in particular will not be aware of all this content. They won't be engaging with it. And Charlotte, I agree, she's fantastic, and she looked so cool at Wimbledon. With the, do you see the photo with the fans and with Kate? She looked so good. But right now it's like the calm before the storm, and you can see William's probably kind of trying to get her, position her for a role with the Lionesses in the future, maybe once she's out of university.
Love that, yeah.
Not hopefully playing.
They seem very interested in sport. It's clearly a passion the kids have.
Hugely.
They're not just pushing them in there.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's so natural, kind of compared to Harry and Meghan's sort of manufactured authenticity.
The as ever Instagram post.
Yes, that's I think they are cousins and they've never met each other, and it's quite sad to think about. And they are just growing up on completely different sides of the world, but in completely different environments. So
they're all in very unique positions. It's interesting, but also very different. We'll see how that rolls out then. So lastly, two very, very high-profile figures have been in Scotland this week. King Charles was in the Scottish Highlands recently in honour of the 70th anniversary of the area's two major nuclear sites. But also, of course, the US president was there, but the two didn't meet up. So we've got the state visit in September. Was there any initial thought that they might meet? Of course, Keir Starmer met up with Mr Trump while he was there, but was there any conversations early doors that maybe the King would see him then, or would there have been any benefit in that informal meeting before the state visit?
there was something in the letter that Starmer gave Trump. So there was this big theatrical moment in the Oval Office when Starmer went out there to Washington and he presented this letter to Trump, and Trump like held it up to the cameras, which gave us a chance to see it. And really amusingly, Charles was inviting Trump to Dumfries House, which is his pet project in Scotland, that Charles just loves Dumfries House. So obviously it was going to be Dumfries House and Balmoral. So that it was bandied about, but then I think we're told it was purely logistical and that, it was because of diary clashes. I can't help but wonder whether maybe, there might have been some discussions and one side or the other or both didn't quite like the shape of how things were going. But also, I think Charles and his team will have been watching some of Trump's comments at the press conference with Keir Starmer with their jaws on the floor, because Starmer was completely monstered by Donald Trump. And it was absolutely toe-curling watching the president bring up all these things that Starmer just absolutely didn't want to talk about, from Trump trashing Sadiq Khan. Starmer said, "He's my friend," and Trump just continued anyway. it was classic Trump.
There's a lot in it. Yeah.
There's just so much in it, and Trump is basically inviting Starmer to decide to be weak or to be strong. And if you're going to choose to be strong, then you have to go toe to toe with Trump, and you might not have the guts to see that through. But if you decide to be weak, then you've rolled over, and Trump kind of owns you. And it's absolutely classic Trump theatre. Charles will be spared most of that, because there's no way in a million years he's going to do a sit-down press conference alongside Trump answering questions. But he will need to be very careful what he says to the president during the state visit in September, and particularly, no chat about Harry and Meghan straight off the bat.
And as you say, he will have to be careful, because even after, that just reminded me last year when Prince William met up with Mr. Trump in Paris, and he actually spoke later about their conversation. There was nothing, too deep in it, but it's more just that reminder that he'll probably repeat it.
Absolutely.
He may well pass that on. So speaking of that state visit, given current global tensions, how much pressure will there be on the King? Because it's coming up relatively soon. When it comes to UK-US relations, what pressure is he looking at, and what will his major focus be for those 2 days?
I think his major focus will be sort of getting diplomatic tensions at bay. I think Keir Starmer's relationship with Trump is very different to what the King feels, or what Trump feels for the King. I mean, he has got so much reverence for the royal family. That is someone he actually really respects. One of the few people, I think, that Trump would not try any of that stuff on with. So I think when you think about how even that state visit letter was delivered in the White House, that was one of the first things that Keir Starmer did, was give Trump that letter, because at that time the relations were really bad between the UK and the US. There was a lot of fighting going on, and so I think that this will just be about showing Trump, the greatest of Britain, what Britain has to offer, and also the royal family, which he loves so much. I'm sure there'll be some other tour of Buckingham Palace. I know he got one from the Queen last time.
And of course, all the pomp and ceremony that we love to see. And the fact it's at Windsor Castle as well actually is quite special. It's a beautiful backdrop for it all. Something else, you've mentioned the press conference. There was a lot in it. But one thing in there that I picked up was a reporter asked the president about King Charles's environmentalism. Now, of course, Trump and the King have very different positions on the environment. But he was glowing about the King's stance. That is the word for it. He was glowing. He actually was gushing over his passion for the environment, which I found very interesting, given their different stances. Are we seeing some of the King's soft power at work in that?
So one key thing is Trump, his policies are not pro-environment. He's pulling America out of the climate accords. He said, drill, baby, drill. He is perfectly happy to, he clearly doesn't want to pile in on Charles in the way that he might pile in on, Justin Trudeau or somebody. And so in that respect, yes, the soft power is actually, Trump is the perfect target for the royal family's soft power. There is not another person on planet Earth who it's more effective on than Donald Trump, because he absolutely he's a massive ego, and he loves it. He loves all the pomp and ceremony. But one thing about Trump is that he will not change his policies for anybody if that's what he thinks the right thing is. And so, yes, it shows that Charles is very effective at warming Trump up, which is what his role is. But if, from Charles's point of view, he will still have grave concerns about the direction that Trump has taken America's environmental policy in.
Fair enough. Lastly, on this topic, there was some speculation that Trump may have thrown shade at Harry and Meghan. I'm going to leave it up to you to decide. I will read out the quote in full and you tell me what you think, because a lot of people online think he was throwing shade. I'm not sure yet. He said, "Being with Charles, Camilla and everybody, I've got to know, because of 4 years as president and now 6 months, I've got to know a lot of the family members. They are great people. They are really great people." And here's the main bit that we're picking up on. "And in that sense, I think the UK is very lucky. You could have people that weren't great people. I don't know if I can say that, but you could have people that weren't." End quote. What do you think? Shade or no shade, Samara?
Total shade. I mean, I think it's no secret that he hates Harry and Meghan. I mean, he's gone on record saying, Harry's a whipped man by Meghan. He should get out of that marriage. I think he is an Anglophile to a T, and he loves sort of being on the side of the royal family, or how he sees it. I think he sees the feud as very cut and dry, and I think he'll say anything that will kind of more appease the King and William's side, and I think that's mega shade.
Okay, and what do you think, Jack?
It would be in character for that to be shade, and it is the kind of way that Trump words these things and phrases them. So I could see it being shade, but I think it is also significant that he kind of stopped himself. That he went halfway down that road and didn't continue all the way, because he has thrown very explicit shade at Meghan in the past. He said, "I'm not a fan of hers. Harry's whipped.
Terrible.
Good luck, Harry, because you're going to need it."
Yeah.
all of these kind of things. So the fact he stopped himself, I think, is indicative of this new kind of phase that the Sussexes and Trump are in, where they didn't campaign against him in the recent election, and he's seen that and decided to pull his tanks off their lawn. And so I think it's kind of indicative of that new phase and the kind of, it's a Cold War rather than a hot war nowadays.
What a note to finish that up on. We actually will finish on our quickfire questions, so strap in, and whatever answer comes to you first is absolutely fine. So we'll begin with, and whoever wants to go first can jump in. Which royal would you most like to watch the footy with?
Australian football or UK?
No, Samara, we're in enemy camps here. It's football, it's soccer in Australia, obviously.
I gotta go with William. He gets into it. Like, you can see each kid, everyone's fist pumping, everyone's really in with it. So yeah, he doesn't hold back. I like someone who wants to chuck their beer on the person.
Yeah, sure. Passionate.
Yeah, passionate.
I would also say William for a slightly different reason, which is that he did actually go to the pub to watch football with the editor of the Sunday Times years ago, Martin Ivins, and Martin Ivins walked out with a front page splash. So I would be hoping to come out of that experience with a little something in my back pocket.
That's perfect. I like that you're still thinking about work. You're going to the footy, but you're also doing the job. You're very good. So if Harry and Meghan signed to another streaming service, if they part ways with Netflix, of course, which show would you want to see from them?
I want to see, so it's RIP Ozzy Osbourne, but I want sort of an Osbourne-style reality show. I want that. I need Meghan in the bed. Yeah, exactly. I need Meghan in the bed doing orders like Sharon did. I need one of the kids screaming. I want the full drama. That's what people want to see. Come on, Meghan.
The Osbournes was spectacular television. That was my era as well.
I want Henry to go on a journey of discovery where he goes and talks to the Trump base and all these MAGA people and explores working class America and goes to all of these Rust Belt states, but not to fight people or argue with them, but to actually learn and understand, kind of like a Louis Theroux type thing where he's soft Harry, because in person, he's really charming with people and people love him in person. So if he could go in with the right attitude to learn, how did America vote for Trump again? Where is the Trump base coming from? What's really going on in working class America? The prince leaves his ivory tower basically and finds out what the real world is doing.
I love both of these, and also we do know. Look, they might be looking to pitch some projects in the coming months, as we've talked about. So
Netflix gets the first look in, apparently.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you what, 50 quid to whoever gets made first.
I hope they both get made.
My bets are on you.
I would pay you each £50. I'd be so excited if they came to fruition. Lastly, there has been some news this week that a Brazilian psychic who has apparently been accurate a number of times in the past has predicted Harry and Meghan will split. Do you think Harry and Meghan will go the distance?
Did she put a timeline on this? Because I've been putting timelines out about
I don't think so, but you feel free to add one if you like.
It doesn't take a psychic to see that marriage is built on just smoke and mirrors and lies for both of them, in my opinion. So I just think that it's very quickly all falling apart. And I think the Brazilian psychic is onto something. She predicted a couple of other things, didn't she? Like COVID? Is that
Yeah.
what? Yeah, that's what you were
Well, they
telling
were saying
me.
The Simpsons. The Simpsons did
My
that too.
timeline is 5 years. I've been saying that
Okay.
now for 5 years. So joking, it is 5 years.
I don't think they're going to split. I think they're going to go the distance. And I think they had a wobble, but I think it's like they must both recognise that both of them have had moments where they nearly sank the ship. Like, Meghan had her ridiculous mock curtsy, on the Netflix show. Harry really should never have discussed his frostbite. They both
Think about that. It stays with you.
both of them have had moments where they nearly
Trauma
sank the ship.
bonded.
Yeah, no, totally. But this is it. They've been through so much together. And honestly, it would destroy both of them reputationally if they split as well. Like, I think Harry would probably carry public opinion. I think it would be absolutely brutalising for Meghan. She'd get blamed for all kinds of things, including the fact that, she would be blamed for creating a rift between Harry and his family. So I think that's a huge reason to stay together. But also I think that actually, ultimately they are better together, and all couples have wobbles and have difficult periods. I think if anything, part of the reason everybody gossips about Harry and Meghan divorcing so much is because they can't talk about the difficult stuff. But actually, if you do go through Harry's book, he does in there. He talks about some of the difficult moments they've had together a little bit. They obviously exist. I think if Harry and Meghan were a little bit more honest about it, took a leaf out of the Beckhams book and did, go through a little bit more of their own dirty laundry instead of always the royal families, then people would maybe believe that their relationship was more sincere. But I think privately, they do actually get on with each other.
We are going to see it all play out soon, though, on the Sussexes, the Osborne style show that's being released. And on that note, this is unconfirmed news, I promise. To both of you, thank you so much for joining me and having a chat. It's been very interesting, as always. That's all we have time for on this week's Royal Exclusive. Thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments as we do read them, and don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. See you next week.